What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another Borderlands 4 build video. Today we are going over the Havoc Harlowe build because you will absolutely wreak havoc across the entirety of this game if you run this build. It's absolutely disgusting, so I named it Havoc Harlowe. And before we jump into it, I want to quickly point something out, and that is the fact that I do not take inspiration from any other content creators. I don't even watch content on this game. My only source of information on the game is from both people in chat when they give me a recommendation or say something. Of course, I'm going to read it, as well as from experiencing things and testing things in game firsthand. I have no doubt in my mind that somebody's already done this build, or at least some version of it, but this is my version of it, and I'm calling it the Havoc Harlowe. Without further ado, jumping straight into her, this build is going to be strictly red tree, focusing around the Chroma Accelerator action skill. Starting at the top left, you're going to put all 5 points into Cyclotron, which is just going to give you a flat 20% fire rate increase. Over to the right of that, you're going to put 1 point into Fuzzy Math, which is just going to give you an increased status effect chance by 10%. To the right of that, you're going to put all 5 points into Field Ready Prototype, which is just going to increase your action skill damage by 30%. Straight down from that one, you're going to put all 5 points into Elementary or Elementary, however you want to say this. I honestly don't know. I'm kind of dumb. But that's essentially just going to give you increased elemental damage and status effect damage. And then straight below that, you're going to put all 3 points into Enriched, which is going to give you increased radiation damage overall. To the left of that one, you're going to put 1 point into Great Red Dot, which is going to give you increased status effect duration. To the left of that, in the middle of this upper part of the red tree, you're going to put your 1 point into Elephant's Foot, which essentially makes it so when your shield breaks, you deal radiation damage to entangled enemies, and you gain an overshield equal to the amount of damage that you dealt. And then just to the left of that, I'm putting 4 points into Get Up and Go. This is just a flat movement speed increase when you use your action skill, which with this build, we're going to be using that a lot. So it's just a nice little quality of life thing. Then getting into the bottom left section of the skill tree, you're going to put all 5 points into Practical Applications, which again is just going to give you a flat skill damage increase of 35%. Now down into this middle tree, you're going to put all 5 points into Poisoned Sun, which is just going to give you a flat increase to radiation damage and your irradiation chance. Straight below that, you're going to put all 3 points into Fissile Launcher, which is going to make it so when you irradiate an enemy or entangle them, you're going to shoot a radiation dart at another enemy. Just good for some crowd control and some extra damage overall. To the right of that, you're going to put all 3 points into Chain Reactor, which is going to let you deal bonus radiation damage to entangled enemies. Down from that one, you're going to put your 1 point into Dirty Bomb, which is going to make it so anytime you irradiate an enemy, you're going to create a radiation explosion on that enemy. Again, just more damage. Then in the bottom left, straight over from that one, you are going to put 1 point into Wasted, which is going to be a kill skill that makes it so when you kill an irradiated enemy, or if you kill an enemy with radiation damage, you're going to leave behind a radiational hazard. Again, just some extra damage, some extra crowd control. Then you're going to put all 5 points into Mechanical Brilliance, which is going to make it so when you damage an enemy with a skill, you gain increased skill damage up to 5 stacks, 10% each stack. And this works really, really well with Chroma Accelerator because that unstable energy pocket actually passes through enemies and will deal pretty much constant damage as it ticks through them, which means you hit those 5 stacks really, really fast. So that explosion at the end is going to deal a bunch of extra damage. In the middle of that skill tree, you're going to put your 1 point into Eureka, which is just going to make it so when you enter Fight for Your Life, you will throw a free unstable energy pocket at a nearby enemy if there is one. Again, this is just a little quality of life thing for if you do happen to go down. Definitely not needed. That's all your skill points. And like I said, you could move a few of these around. Like you could probably move Eureka and even these points in from Get Up and Go into more damage if you really wanted to min-max damage. But in my opinion, the build already does plenty as is. So the couple quality of life skills in there, I feel like are necessary for me. But of course, you could move some of these points around to really go for min-max damage if you wanted to. This is just my setup. I think it works great. I'm literally milking bosses in like 1 second, so I don't think I need the extra damage, but if you really want to, you could do that. For your augment, you're going to run Neutron Capture. This is really what makes or breaks the build. This is what the whole build pretty much revolves around, and essentially what this does is transfers a portion of the damage dealt from your action skill onto your guns, which means the more damage this thing does, the more damage you get on your guns, and it procs once this ability detonates. So once your unstable energy pocket actually blows up, whether or not you blow it up or it hits something or whatever causes it to blow up, once it does, you have 8 seconds where all the damage that it dealt stacks onto your gun in the form of radiation damage. So this is literally what's going to give you all that extra damage, and this is why we have so many skills and stuff spec'd into boosting both elemental damage and straight action skill damage, is because the more damage we can get off with our ability before it detonates is the more damage we're going to do after it detonates. For your capstone, you're going to take Demon Core. This is absolutely filthy for the build because it's going to spawn a bunch of extra projectiles around your unstable energy pocket as it's flying through the air that are going to both seek out enemies and just deal a bunch of extra damage, which of course count as action skill damage. So those are all going to help stack even more damage onto your gun after your ability detonates. And I have tested the build without Demon Core on, and it still is very viable and does a ton of damage. But of course, this is really going to push it over the edge and make it do that much better. So I'd highly recommend running it, but if you really want to, you could go a different route. This is just what what I would recommend personally. But then getting into your actual weapons, there are two main weapons I'm going to recommend for this build. The first one is the Convergence Legendary Shotgun. The second one is the Katagawa's Revenge Legendary Sniper. I'm going to start with the Katagawa's Revenge because in my opinion, this is probably the best weapon for Harlowe for this specific build, because essentially when you transfer that damage to your guns, it's not so much the gun damage as it is the transfer damage itself, which means the more projectiles you can get on target or the more damage you can proc off of an enemy from your gun, the more often you are proccing that extra damage from your action skill. And because this is essentially the Storm from previous Borderlands games, what happens is you shoot an enemy, it spawns 3 little shock orbs that all constantly deal damage to enemies around them. All of that constant damage is also constantly proccing that extra damage from your action skill, so you can stack these things on a boss and literally kill the boss before their health bars even show up, and it is absolutely disgusting. For the rolls, of course, you're going to want a Jacob's roll. That's pretty much the go-to for the majority of legendaries, but I would also highly recommend a COV mag, as this allows you to get double the amount of shots off before you need to reload. Usually the Katagawa's only has like 4 to 6 shots before you reload. You can get 12 plus off with the COV mag, so I would highly recommend the COV mag. And honestly, the Jacob's roll isn't totally necessary. It's of course just a bonus like it is on most of these legendary guns. Getting into the Convergence, the reason this is good is because of course it's a shotgun, so you have several pellets on top of the fact that it's a ripper, so it's full auto and has a decent fire rate for a shotgun. But its main attribute that you get from it being the Convergence shotgun makes it so every time you hit an enemy, a bunch of extra projectiles spawn and all converge on that enemy, which means you are proccing all that extra damage from your action skill like 12 plus times because of all the projectiles from this gun. So you're doing a ton of damage with the Convergence. This has to be like right up there with the Katagawa's. And for the rolls on this one, I would highly recommend you get you an elemental one. A non-elemental one will still do pretty much the same amount of damage, but the reason I say get an elemental one is because dealing elemental damage and proccing those elemental status effects is what's going to give you your ability back pretty much instantaneously with this build. I mean, you can go from just having popped your ability and you're on like a 35-second cooldown to instantaneously having it up and skipping the 35 seconds altogether just by shooting an enemy like 2 or 3 times with this shotgun if you have an elemental version. So I would highly recommend it being elemental just for that action skill cooldown. And then of course, I'm also going to recommend the COV mag for the same reason as the Katagawa's. It's just going to give you more shots before you have to reload, which is really nice. As far as these other 2 weapons go, it honestly doesn't matter. You can put whatever you want here. I'm running a Chaosin just for fun, and because it's a Vladoff and has a decent fire rate and all that stuff, it does pretty solid on the build as well. And then I'm also running the Aegon's Dream for the same reason. Vladoff, high fire rate, gun go burr means lots of damage, so that's also a good one, but you can put whatever you want here. I'd mostly just recommend the Convergence and the Katagawa's. Getting into the gear down here, we've got a rep kit with fire rate and elemental affinity on it. What this is going to do is, of course, the faster you shoot, the more you're proccing that damage. And for elemental affinity, it's going to give you a flat 25% increase to elemental damage. And of course, that damage coming off of our ability is elemental, it's radiation, so that's going to work like a dream. The only other roll I'd recommend getting is fire rate plus enrage, which is pretty much the same thing, except it's actually 30% instead of only 25. This is just the roll I happen to get, but either one of those rolls are pretty much the god roll for the build. And this is where the build video gets a little bit controversial here, and it is because I'm running the crit knife. Now, as I've said in this video a bunch of times before, this build is absolutely cracked and it does not need the crit knife. Okay, the build will do absolutely fine as is. It does not need the crit knife. I'm just running it because I have one. You know what I mean? The crit knife is going to make every build ever better. So it's not that every build needs it or revolves around it or anything like that. It's just that it's like if you find one, use it because it's going to make your build better. But at the end of the day, I have done tests on stream, if you care to go try to find that content, looking through the hours of my stream, where I test the difference between using the knife and not using the knife on boss damage in UVH5. We're talking about like maybe a 3 to 5 second difference with versus without the knife. So with the knife, you're pretty much insta killing a boss within like 2 or 3 seconds. Without the knife, it's closer to like 5 to 7 seconds. So realistically speaking, you're still killing a boss in like less than 10 seconds without the knife, which is more than good enough in my opinion. Another really good option if you don't have a knife is always going to be these minigun Vladoff ordnance, because of course crazy fire rate means crazy procs off of that extra action skill damage. So if you don't have a knife, those are really good options. Otherwise, even just like a straight up basic amp knife, not with the crit roll, will also be pretty good. As far as the enhancement goes, I'm just running some basic green enhancement. This is doing nothing for the build. I tried and tried and tried. I could not get an enhancement to drop that gave me any kind of improvements to the build. So if you can find one that actually works, great. But the issue is the build works off of a very specific type of damage, and there's not many enhancements in the game that are actually going to increase that specific type of damage. So if you can find one, cool. I couldn't, so none of the rolls on this even matter. It's literally just a placeholder to give me Deadeye for my firmware, so don't worry about the enhancement too much. It doesn't do a whole lot for the build, honestly. And for the shield, of course, I have the fireworks shield. This has been in like all of my builds. I absolutely love the shield. It's probably my favorite shield in the game. And you already know we got the radiation one because we have a ton of bonuses to radiation damage, which means we are boosting this shield's rockets by a ton. And this thing is absolutely disgusting for mobbing. So I always recommend one of these shields. Of course, you could go a different route if you want to synergize with a different shield. I just like this one. And for the class mod, this is going to be another pretty big part of the build. Again, not totally necessary, but if you want that damage procced all the time, it's also kind of necessary. And it is the Skeptic. Nothing on this card really matters except for that last line of text where it says shooting enemies with an active status effect restores 5% of action skill cooldown. Basically what that means is when you're proccing your status effects on an enemy, it's going to give you action skill cooldown, which is exactly why what I mentioned with the convergence being elemental and having so many projectiles, you are almost constantly proccing an elemental effect on an enemy, which means with only like 2 or 3 shots, you proc so many, you already have your action skill back. Other than that, literally there are pretty much no rolls you can get on this thing that are going to majorly benefit the build, so I wouldn't even worry about it. If you get one drop, don't try to farm a god roll. It's pretty much going to work the same, so just get one of these and you're good. And jumping straight into the firmware, we are running all 3 tiers of Deadeye. Deadeye is probably going to be on every build ever. It's almost never bad to synergize with a build. It almost always benefits your build in some way, so Deadeye is always good. Of course, we don't necessarily care about the gun accuracy or the gun crit damage, as none of the damage of this build comes off of gun damage, but it is that last tier of Deadeye that we are benefiting from, which is not necessarily gun crit damage, but just general crit damage increased by 15% per stack up to 5 stacks, which means when you proc that extra skill damage and then you're shooting them in the Critorus, you are getting that extra damage, which is super nice. Next, we're running Goo JFC. Of course, that first skill does not really matter. We're already getting our action skill up pretty much instantaneously with the class mod, but that second tier giving us that 15% action skill damage is huge because, again, the more damage we deal with that action skill, the more damage we deal with our guns. So I would highly recommend Goo JFC there. As far as specializations, in the theme of this build, these honestly don't really matter. You could do a bunch of different combinations of these. They're not necessarily going to make or break the build. The only ones I would kind of recommend would be I Am a Gun, because it's going to give you bonus action skill damage based off of your benefits to gun damage. So if you have any kind of benefits to gun damage, this is going to help your action skill. I'm running that one personally. I'm also running In the Zone, which is going to give you extra crit damage per second while aiming. Again, this one does work, but it's not going to make or break the build. It is just a bit of extra damage though. Down but not out, just for the extra aim down sights and stuff when you're down. So if you do go down, it's a little bit easier to hit your shots and get back up. And Let Her Alive, same thing, reloads your gun, increases your fire rate when you go down, just a little bit of quality of life, so it helps you get back up. You can put these wherever you want. That's just how I have mine set up. Again, I don't think any of these are going to make or break the build, so do what you want, go crazy, try some different combinations, let me know what you find. And as far as how to play with the build, for mobbing, it's super easy. You don't need to worry about your stim or your ordnance. I pretty much just use my action skill into a group of enemies. The more you can hit with it, the better, but even if you can only hit 1 or 2 dudes, as long as you let it tick through them a couple times before it detonates, you will still get some really gross damage. And at that point, I just spam some Katagawas around and it generally wipes the whole area super fast with little to no issue. For bossing, most of the bosses are really big targets, which is really nice, but even on the smaller ones, I pretty much just drop down into the arena, pop my stim. Immediately after I pop my stim, I use my ability. As my ability is flying towards the boss, I'll hit him with a crit knife, but of course, you don't need the knife, so if you don't have the knife, you just skip that whole step unless you're using one of the minigun ordinances or something. In that case, you'd pull that out and get ready to shoot. And once your ability has ticked through the boss a few times and is either kind of in him or on the other side of him, you can detonate your ability and then just lay into the boss. And even without the crit knife, most bosses are going to die within about 5 seconds or so. But even if you manage to mess it up or something just doesn't work right and for whatever reason you can't kill him within that 8-second window, assuming you are using either Katagawas or an elemental convergence, you are literally immediately going to get your action skill back as soon as you start shooting the boss. So even if you have to do a reset, you should be able to instantly loop and pop your ability again and start the chain all over. So it's absolutely gross for bossing, absolutely gross for mobbing, literally gross for everything in the game. That's why I call it Havoc Harlowe. It doesn't matter what you're doing, she's absolutely just gonna wreak havoc, dude. Easily, in my opinion, the best build in the entire game, because all you really need is a decent gun with a decent fire rate. You could quite literally use a level 1 Grave Vladoff as long as it had a good fire rate and you spec'd into these skills specifically. If you had neutron capture and all the stuff to boost your extra damage for your action skill and a gray level 1 Vladoff with really good fire rate, this build would still milk bosses at UVH5 level 50. So honestly, probably one of the best and easiest builds in the game to run, as it takes little to no items as well as little to no effort. So it's absolutely disgusting and you guys definitely got to try this. But that's gonna about do it for the build video, guys. If you guys enjoyed the video, do let me know, drop a like, consider subscribing if you're not already. And again, if there's anything you think I should change with this build or something that you think would be done better, let me know in the comments below. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.